Hey, and welcome to a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. I'm Ron Coddington, the editor and publisher of Military Images magazine. Today's story begins 12 years ago in 2010. I added the photograph that you see here of an identified New York militia soldier to my collection. Um, what attracted me was his uniform. It's a really nice example of a New York militia outfit. I like the sort of the general look, the quality of the print. All of those qualities attracted me. Did not know who he was, and there was some considerable conversation when I posted it on my Flickr photo stream that he might be from the 7th New York. He might be from some other unit in the area. And that's where it's at for the last dozen years. Last night, as I was sorting through all the email that had come in through the day, one of the messages in my inbox came from Scott Valentine. And Scott is a contributing editor to the magazine. He's also a columnist. He writes Vignette, which is one of our departments. In each issue, he provides an episode in the life of a Civil War soldier or sailor, and each of those is accompanied by a photograph of the individual. So Scott sent in the story of the soldier who's pictured here. Scott has a similar print, a carte de visite in his collection. And the moment that I saw Scott's photograph, I thought, oh my gosh, I've just identified an image in my collection that had been unknown for a dozen years. And so I was absolutely delighted. And Scott's poignant story about Thorpe left an impression of me. Scott also included all of his footnotes. And I went to sleep last night thinking this morning, I'm going to investigate this and see what I can learn. So this morning, Veterans Day, I learned more about the life of this individual. And his name is Thomas Sturgis Thorpe Jr. He's from New York and joined the 23rd New York State Militia Regiment. And in 1863, he and his regiment were mobilized. They were called up for federal service to repel General Robert E. Lee's invasion of the North, the one that ended the Battle of Gettysburg. And so you can imagine this young man and his regiment. Thomas is 21 years old when he's called up for duty. He's having this experience, marching footsore, going through the Pennsylvania countryside, not getting food. He's exposed to the elements. All of his comrades are the same way. It really makes an impression upon him. And he leaves behind some letters that provide a glimpse of what his experience was like. And I want to read a couple of them to you, a couple of quotes from those letters to give you a sense of what he saw, of what he witnessed. One of those quotes, and I should say all of these quotes are post-battle as they are in pursuit of Lee's fleeing forces. In one of these quotes, he talks about seeing Major General George G. Meade. Here's the quote. I was very glad to get a sight of Meade, as he certainly has proved himself thus far the man. I should say he was over 50 years of age, tall and gaunt, with a very decided stoop of the shoulders and an anxious, careworn expression of countenance. It is said the stoop is occasioned by his former studious habit, as he is a scholar. He rode ahead of his staff and reminded me of pictures I have seen of John Brown. What a wonderful portrait of General Meade. Here's another quote by Thomas talking about the Union cavalry that's pursuing Lee's army. July 6th, 7th, somewhere in there. Here's his quote. We were constantly passed on the road by cavalry regiments dashing on. I never saw such riding as I have witnessed during my campaign life. Every horseman goes at the top of his speed, and all ride finely. They all sit firmly in the saddle, toes turned out, legs stiff and straight, body back, and ride according to the regular army fashion, a constant jolt. I have not seen a single rider yet ease himself in the stirrups after the manner of our gentlemen riders at home. They all sit firm and steady and go at it like mad. The effect of this hard riding is seen constantly along the road, which is strewn on all sides at short intervals with the carcasses of dead horses and mules, so that the whole country is perfumed with the odor of dead horse flesh. It is most sickening, and I should think would soon cause a pestilence. One of his letters, written at the very end of his mobilization and his time in Pennsylvania, summarizes his overall experience during that month. This is a letter that he writes home to his parents. He says, quote, "I never before knew what it was to be hungry, going for 36 hours with not enough to make a scanty meal. Never before have I known what it was to be utterly prostrated with fatigue until now, when, night after night, I have felt perfectly exhausted, both physically and mentally, and have fallen to the ground with scarcely strength enough remaining to remove my equipments, and slept through rain, storms, and everything else. I have been astonished at my own powers of endurance. While the strongest men in our company have fallen out on the march and caught up to us afterwards by means of wagons, I have not been obliged to fall out once, but have kept along constantly, although obliged to test my powers at times to the uttermost." These excerpts that I'm reading to you come from a book, and it's simply called The Memorial of Thomas S. Thorpe, Jr. It's a 110-page book that was published in 1867, 4 years after his Gettysburg experience, 2 years after the end of the war. His tragic end, his early end of his life, was also talked about in the book. There's a reference to his great work that he did with the Men's Christian Organization in New York City, relationship with a young woman that he was excited about. But underneath all of it, there was some issues that he was experiencing. And this quote, I think, probably speaks best to it. It was written by a minister. It says, quote, "That overburdened nature came to a sudden pause. A strange, dark cloud, little by little, began to settle upon his mind. There was nothing in all the horizon of his future to occasion it, nothing that any friendly eye could discern, no sign of the coming storm, as big as a man's hand. On the contrary, his outlook upon life was never fair. He himself said he could not understand what ailed him. There was no cause that he could assign for his melancholy. Still, a strange oppression he could neither reason against nor throw off was brooding over him. He was seen sitting in solitary places, holding his head in his hands. When spoken to, he would always answer, sometimes naturally, and with an effort to smile, at other times meekly and patiently, but sad with hopelessness. The truth was, God had somehow touched the secret spring of mental health within him. The malady was unseen, unknown. Human wisdom and love could not remove it. He knew that he was surrounded by troops of friends, that he was the recipient of the prize he had most coveted in life, the dear love of her he loved best. He used to say he would give worlds if he could rid himself of the oppression that bore him down as with a mountain's weight." End quote. He had everything going for him. He was plagued by what, when you look back at his life, his short life, look at the military service, you can't help but think, is this a case of post-traumatic stress disorder that plagued him? We won't know. Medicine of the time wasn't really focused on diagnosing these kinds of illnesses, unlike today, where veterans and others have opportunities for care. Still, doesn't always end well. It didn't end well for Thomas Thorpe. He took his own life on March 6th, 1867. He was a few months shy of his 26th birthday. I've included his the book, the 110-page volume written by those who were close to him, those who loved him, including his letters from his war service. I've included it here at the bottom of this post, connected to this video. So if you want to take a look at it, please do. On this Veterans Day, when we're remembering folks, remembering soldiers, sailors, other members of other military branches, I'm going to be thinking about Thomas Thorpe, whose story came to me late last night and revealed itself this morning. So I appreciate you listening. We'll be back next week on the trail. Take care.